It's time for today's perspective, and I'm joined here on set by Nadim Houry. He's Executive Director of the Arab Reform Initiative. It's an NGO dedicated to democratic change in Arab countries. Thanks very much for coming in and talking to us on the programme. We were just talking briefly. You told me that you were in Beirut just 10 days ago, and I know you have a big connection with Beirut. You worked there for 10 years, in fact, starting and running the Beirut office of Human Rights Watch. Knowing the city as you know it and looking at those images that we saw yesterday as those bombs landed on the city, I mean, give us your impression, first of all, of what on earth it could be like trying to live in that situation at the moment in Beirut.
Look, yesterday, Lebanese are used to war, unfortunately, but yesterday was definitely one of the worst days in recent years. I was on the phone with actually colleagues at the Arab Reform Initiative when the bombs were falling, and they described it very similar to what happened when the Beirut port exploded in 2020, just sort of massive deflagration. It was a beautiful spring day. People actually were quite hopeful that day because the ceasefire had been announced, and they had heard the Pakistani mediator saying Lebanon is included. So people were out and about, and suddenly in the early afternoon, just all hell broke loose. Ambulances everywhere. For people who are maybe French, it sounded a bit like the 13th of November. Just ambulances everywhere, hospitals overwhelmed. Central Beirut, which had been relatively spared the war so far, was massively attacked. More than 94 people killed that we know of, more than 700 wounded in what we would call Beirut intramuros, central Beirut. Chaos, fear. None of those attacks were announced. They hit people in cafes. Parents rushed to pick up their kids from schools. Just sort of scenes of panic. Hospitals were asking for blood units. So the best way to describe it is just sheer terror that rained from the sky.
I'm surprised to hear you say that people, initially anyway, when that ceasefire was announced, were so open to the fact that it could be over. I mean, no, it wasn't long, for example, before Benjamin Netanyahu came out, and his office anyway, and said, no, this does not include Lebanon.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Lebanese took it from the Pakistani official mediator. It was very clear in their statement. In that tweet by the Pakistani mediator, they actually @signed on X the US administration. Sure, people are hanging on to threads. Not just that people were out and about. There were actually thousands of people from southern Lebanon that actually got on the road hoping to go back to their land. That's how attached they are to it. They heard Netanyahu, but maybe they thought this was Israeli bluster. There might be some skirmishes, but did not expect that level of violence. Again, 50 planes, more than 100 strikes in less than 10 minutes. That is actually a deliberate strategy of imposing terror and of really scaring. I mean, we hadn't seen anything like this in this war, nor in the 2024 war from Israel.
A lot of calls, notably from France, of course, for Lebanon to be included in that ceasefire. How is that possible? How can Lebanon ensure, how can other world powers ensure that Lebanon is part of the ceasefire?
Impose sanctions on Israel. It's very simple.
Is that really going to happen then?
It should happen. I mean, you've got Netanyahu who is wanted by the ICC. Europe says that they are for the rule of law. They were behind the Rome Statute. Just actually enforce those decisions. Europe has very clear mechanisms around suspending association agreement with Israel. It's clear that Israel has violated. European leaders themselves, France, Spain, Belgium, even the UK, are very clear that Israel has committed violations of international law, war crimes, and so forth. Why not act upon it? I mean, what is clear right now, even from the leaks in the New York Times, is that Israel has dragged the US into a war with Iran. It's been a disastrous war, clearly for Iran, for the region, and frankly, globally. Now, Israel is again threatening the ceasefire by escalating its attacks on Lebanon. They could have decided yesterday to just target narrow Hezbollah posts near the border, right? Probably most people would not have said anything. But no, they decided on purpose to escalate. Why? Because they want to scuttle the negotiations. and they want the war to resume. So what should world leaders do? Tell Israel, stop it. You're just violating international law, and we're not going to let you do this.
Is there another way? I mean, Donald Trump obviously is in a very difficult position now because he wants this ceasefire to succeed, but it's not going to succeed, is it, when these kind of attacks continue? Is there not another way of stopping it through Donald Trump?
Sure, if Donald Trump exerts pressure on Israel for Israel to stop. I mean, we know what the
I mean, is it as simple as that? Do you think Donald Trump could just pick up a phone?
Of course.
And call?
I mean, we know militarily, Israel, look at the strikes yesterday, right? Someone has to replenish Israeli stocks. These are very expensive bombs. It takes time. They're actually US manufactured in large part. So if Donald Trump picks up the phone and says, look, Netanyahu, I'm not going to replenish your stock if you keep doing this. I'm here negotiating, so give me a month. Don't do something, quote unquote, stupid during that month, to use the Donald Trump language. I'm sure it can rein him in. The thing is, you also have the Lebanese official government saying, we want to negotiate with the Israelis. We want to disarm Hezbollah. Give us time to do it. Give us support to do it. That is the only track forward. What is Israel doing? It's actually going to be counterproductive. Hezbollah today is probably stronger than it was when the war started, because Israel is destroying the only actor that could eventually disarm Hezbollah, and that is the Lebanese state. The Lebanese state today looks very weak. So how can you convince people who've supported Hezbollah to say, oh, the Lebanese state can actually defend you, when they just lived through the terror of yesterday?
Of course, we've got these peace talks now starting, we think, on Saturday. Do you have any hope for them?
To be honest, they're off to a very bad start. I've never heard of a ceasefire agreement supposedly with 10 points when no one seems to know what the 10 points actually include or don't include. And it's not just Lebanon there's unclarity. There's unclarity about the enrichment. There's unclarity about who controls the Strait of Hormuz and whether Iran can impose levies on boats going through. So it's off to a bad start, and the trust is very, very low. I mean, we know that the VP Vance is going to be going there, except that also the two members that the U.S. is sending were the same two members that were negotiating with Iran, 2 months ago, when they decided to undermine the negotiations and attack Iran. So I'm not sure. I mean, I want to be hopeful because this is a disastrous war that no one will actually win. It will just bring misery and leave the region even more fragile. On the other hand, the objective elements for success don't appear to be there at this stage.
And do you think if the talks don't work, we could be back to violence? I had a former NATO general on yesterday, a French general, who was saying he doesn't think there's any way now Donald Trump would go back to violence, bearing in mind what's happened. But do you think that's still
It depends what you mean by violence. So Donald Trump needs an off-ramp because he was actually pigeonholed, right? He could see that there's actually no good military options left. But we could remain with a level of violence that the U.S. could live with, but that the region could not live with. What we saw in Lebanon, what we will maybe see in Iraq. The Gulf countries are exposed. So what we didn't talk about yesterday as much was there were attacks on GCC installations as well. So unfortunately, if the negotiations fail, we may not go back to, Donald Trump may have gotten his off-ramp, so he doesn't actually have to invade, which would be a disaster. But actually, he will leave the region in a form of violence because nothing has been resolved. Everything has been worsened.
One last question for you. I mean, your organisation very much pushing for democracy in the region. I mean, bearing in mind what is going on, I mean, how on earth do you even start trying to spread that message?
Sure, look, we need two tracks. The first track is obviously the guns have to go silent. There has to be some sort of new regional security order to give societies the space to start rebuilding. But that new regional order cannot just be about geopolitical alignments. It has to also include rebuilding domestic legitimacy. And this is where inclusive governance, democracy, social justice, even environmental justice become essential to build more stable regional orders. Because we know in this region that in 20 years, just autocrats and deals like the Abraham Accords that don't take into account the needs of actually the societies, but simply some intra-elite deals, they are not stable. We have actually the proof. So when people tell us, oh, you're naive to work about this, I'm like, no, you're the naive ones because you've actually been doing this for the last 30 years. And what has it given us? The region with the highest number of displaced, highest number of destruction, and the highest level of inequality in the world.
Good to have you with us on the programme today. Thanks very much for talking to us. Nadim Houry, Executive Director of the Arab Reform Initiative. Thanks once again.